Greetings, Faith Bible Institute students, and all of you who are visiting our channel. In the previous episode, I spoke in some detail about correspondence between C.S. Lewis and his lifelong pen pal and friend, Arthur Greeves. And that conversation centered on Lewis's relationship to Christianity. Now, when we left off, we said that Lewis, after giving the strong impression that he had become a Christian, he soon pulled back on that and explained that he had actually only moved a bit closer. And he was almost certain that Christianity was true. So what this means is that Lewis was still only a theist, believing in God, but not yet a believer in Christ. Let's explore this a little further. According to a spiritual autobiography titled Surprised by Joy, which we have right here, I highly recommend that you read this book if you want to delve into Lewis's understanding of things and how he came to Christ. But he says in that book that his conversion to theism occurred in the Trinity term of 1929. He recounts in a famous line known by all Lewis enthusiasts, "I gave in and admitted that God was God, and knelt and prayed, perhaps that night, the most dejected and reluctant convert in all England." You see, he had said he did not want to meet God. He wanted to meet God as much as a mouse wants to find a cat. He even says that. But see, the evidence of God's presence was so overwhelming in his life at that point that he gave in and admitted that God was God. This phrase, the most reluctant convert, is now the title of a movie about C.S. Lewis that recently came out. And I want to encourage you to watch it. It's pretty good if you get the opportunity. But now, from this time in Trinity term, which by the way runs between April and June at Oxford University, even to this day, Lewis began believing in God. But he makes clear that this conversion was only to theism, pure and simple, not to Christianity. Over the next couple years, Lewis was obviously thinking about Christianity. But he explains to Greeves in the October 18 letter of 1931 that what was holding him back and his difficulty, his puzzle, was with this: the whole doctrine of redemption. In what sense the life and death of Christ saved or opened salvation to the world? He couldn't see what the doctrine meant, or how the life and death of someone else, whoever he was, 2,000 years ago, could help us here and now. In Surprised by Joy, he says that it was Tolkien and Dyson, J.R.R. Tolkien of Lord of the Rings fame, and another English professor, Hugo Dyson. They became two of his closest friends and colleagues there at the university, but they also happened to be Christians. But these are the two that, according to Lewis, in Surprised by Joy, got him over that last barrier. How they did it is most fascinating. In the October 18 letter, Lewis tells Greeves, "What Dyson and Tolkien showed me was this," and then he proceeds to explain how they observed that he was able to accept sacrifice and the idea of the dying and reviving God anywhere except in the Gospels. See, he could be moved by myth as profound and suggestive of meanings beyond my grasp without even knowing what it meant, but would not be so moved when he saw it in the life of Christ. Lewis obviously understood their challenge to his inconsistency and leading him to think deeply about Christianity. Now picture these men walking along the beautiful Addison's Walk at Oxford University, having this conversation. Here is what Lewis learned that evening in mid-September 1931. Here is the important statement: the story of Christ is simply a true myth, with the tremendous difference that it really happened. He continues, and listen carefully to this, because this is one of the keys to understanding Lewis as a Christian and an apologist. It is God's myth, where the others are men's myths. That is, the pagan stories, what I have called God stories in previous videos, are God expressing himself through the minds of poets, using such images as he found there, while Christianity is God expressing himself through what we call real things. Therefore, it is true, in the sense of being the way in which God chooses to or can appear to our faculties. Now, by real things, Tolkien and Dyson meant the actual incarnation, crucifixion, and resurrection. This is not what Lewis had come to believe yet, but what Tolkien and Dyson shared with him that began penetrating his heart. This was their gospel presentation, so to speak, to lead Lewis closer to Christ. Not a very common way to share the gospel, I realize that, but it was just what Lewis needed. And Tolkien and Dyson were equipped to do it. And thank God that they were there and they could do it. Now, after describing what they told him, Lewis clarifies to Greaves his retracted current position regarding Christianity. Does this amount to belief in Christianity? Well, at any rate, I am now certain, A, that this Christian story is to be approached in a sense as I approach the myths, and B, that it is the most important and full of meaning. I am almost nearly certain that it really happened. So, for Lewis, he was not as sure that it was true to the extent that his October 1 letter might have led Greaves and even us to believe. But he had, as he wrote to Greaves in the October 18 letter, moved a bit closer to becoming a Christian. Okay. After this correspondence, unfortunately, we do not get anything as clear as what we will call Lewis's false start in the October 1 letter. I'm calling this a false start because Lewis had written, I have just passed on from believing in God, that is theism, to definitely believing in Christ, in Christianity. But as we just learned, he had not yet fully made this transition at this point. This means we cannot know exactly when his conversion to Christ happened. Remember, Lewis was clear about his conversion to theism in the Trinity term of 1929. But as he tells us in Surprised by Joy, his transition from mere theism to Christianity is the one in which, this is a quote, I'm now least informed. So, Lewis himself tells us he could not recall the specific calendar details of his final conversion to Christ. He does, however, recall the occasion on which it happened. He was riding in the sidecar of his older brother's motorcycle on a trip together to the Whipsnade Zoo in London. These trips to the zoo were something that the brothers did commonly, so it's difficult to pinpoint on which trip this happened. But here's what Lewis says about it. It was on a sunny morning. When we set out, I did not believe that Jesus Christ is the Son of God. And when we reached the zoo, I did. That's how he explains it. He describes his conversion like this. It's like when a man, after long sleep, lying still motionless in the bed, becomes aware that he now is awake. In other words, it was a slow process, a dawning realization, not a sudden, conscious, emotional turning. Now, his brother confirms that his conversion happened on a trip to the zoo and that it was not sudden, but rather a slow convalescence from a deep-seated spiritual illness. Interesting. You see, people come to saving faith in Christ in different ways. Not everyone has a Damascus Road conversion like the Apostle Paul. A lot of Christians, perhaps you, cannot remember the exact date and time that it happened. I can say with quite a bit of certainty, because of circumstances I figured out, that I came to full faith in Christ one evening in the week beginning August 17, 1980. But C.S. Lewis's conversion to Christ is one of the most unusual I have ever read about. So how can we know he really did convert from theism to Christianity, since he did not say, this is when I finally got saved? Does he leave us any hints as to what year and time of year it happened? And is it really important to understand? I believe so. His brother also helps confirm the year, but we will save those fascinating details for the next time. If you like this video, please press the like button. And if you haven't already, please consider subscribing to our channel and ring that bell up there in the right corner if you want notifications when we upload new content. The Lord bless you and keep you until the next time.